You don't lose someone. You set yourself free. This is the truth no one wants to hear, but it's what separates those who live trapped in pain from those who achieve emotional freedom. While most beg for explanations, Stoicism teaches that power lies in strategic silence and emotional detachment. The world taught you that love is holding on tightly, even when it hurts. Lie. Self-love is cutting ties when the other person's presence destroys your inner peace. It's having emotional control to look into the eyes of a toxic relationship and say, with calculated coldness, "No more here." You think you can't forget someone because you feel too much. The truth, you don't forget because you feed every day the bond you should have broken. It's like trying to heal a wound by touching it all the time. Strategic distancing is the only real cure. No one told you that overcoming rejection isn't about proving your worth to the one who left, but about redirecting your personal focus toward what builds you up. It's practicing self-knowledge to understand that your inner strength has never depended on anyone's validation. When you learn the 7 secret keys, you realize you don't need to shout to be heard. That strategic silence can be more devastating than any speech, and that mastering your reactions is the first step to achieving resilience and personal growth. Stoicism isn't an invitation to turn to stone. It's training to have enough emotional intelligence to choose your battles. Some you win by fighting. Others, you win by leaving the scene with dignity and mental mastery. You'll realize that the pain of stepping away is temporary, but the peace of keeping your distance is permanent. That emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's knowing that not everything you want is something that should stay in your life. Attachment creates illusions. It makes you believe that without that person, you lose who you are. But when you break ties and practice emotional freedom, you realize you were only limited by invisible chains. Chains you can break yourself. Calculated coldness isn't about revenge. It's about protecting your energy from toxic relationships, about cutting ties that drain you before they break you. It's about keeping your psychological strength intact, even when the world expects you to beg to come back. The secret to overcoming resentment isn't waiting for time to do the work. It's acting. Practicing emotional detachment every day until the other person's absence becomes just another detail in your life's scenery, and not its center. Those who master these keys discover that forgetting someone is more about creating a new routine than erasing memories. It's filling mental space with constructive actions, not with memories that weaken your resilience and steal your inner peace. If you want true inner power, you must accept that not everything deserves a second chance, that some doors, once closed, should never be opened. That self-love is also having the courage to say no when your heart still says yes. The emotional intelligence we're going to build here will show you that emotional distancing isn't the absence of feelings. It's the ability to feel, but not be controlled by it. It's having mental mastery over every reaction, every word, every choice. You already know that living trapped in the past is a prison. Now you'll learn how to free yourself without drama, without begging, without playing the same game. You'll learn to let go so elegantly that silence will speak for you. Get ready, because each key you're about to learn is a silent weapon against everything that holds you back. They're not obvious, they're not popular, and often they go against everything you've been taught about love and relationships. And when you apply each of them, you'll understand that the true victory isn't winning back the one who left. It's winning yourself back. And then, my friend, no one will ever have the power to trap you again. Key 1 is to recognize the power of your decisions. This is the foundation of emotional detachment, the point where emotional control stops being theory and becomes practice. Stoicism teaches that although it's not possible to control everything that happens, it's always possible to control how you react. This understanding changes everything. By realizing that life will bring situations beyond your reach, you start valuing the territory that is under your control, your choices. That's where emotional independence, inner strength, and strategic silence that disarms any manipulation are born. Detachment isn't ignoring feelings, but learning not to be enslaved by them. It's conscious emotional distancing, the kind that protects inner peace without needing explanations. It's the calculated coldness that preserves energy and cuts ties with what drains your psychological strength. Imagine receiving a message from someone you're trying to forget. The automatic decision would be to reply, seek explanations, or feed hope. But the conscious decision is to maintain strategic distance, remembering that overcoming rejection requires choices that strengthen self-control. Every time you choose not to act on impulse, you strengthen your inner power. This is self-knowledge in action, identifying that responding to provocations doesn't bring you closer to personal growth, but instead perpetuates ties with toxic relationships. And yes, this is how to overcome, by deciding not to return to what hurts. True mental mastery is built in small gestures. It's closing the social media tab to avoid checking the life of someone who's no longer part of your journey. It's choosing a book, a workout, or a new project instead of diving into memories that feed resentment. Overcoming resentment doesn't happen by sudden forgetfulness. It's the result of consistent decisions, cutting ties when necessary, protecting inner peace, and investing in personal growth. It's transforming the time that would be spent on drama into fuel for personal focus. Emotional freedom is achieved when you realize that no one can control your mind unless you allow it. This is emotional intelligence, being aware that strategic distancing is more effective than any verbal confrontation. When you practice strategic silence, something changes in how others perceive you. Those who once had unlimited access to your emotions begin to understand they no longer have space to manipulate your reactions. It's as if an invisible barrier had been raised. Breaking ties does not mean closing your heart forever. It means clearly choosing where to invest your energy. It is self-love to decide that some doors must remain closed, not out of resentment, but out of respect for your inner peace. I remember an acquaintance who, when facing the end of a relationship, wanted answers. Instead of seeking confrontations, he decided to travel alone. He came back with new stories, new ideas, and an inner strength that only conscious emotional distancing could have given him. That choice was the key that took him out of the cycle of toxic relationships. He realized that overcoming resentment was more about letting go than about understanding every detail of what happened. The decision to step away created space for a stronger self-love. When you choose calculated coldness over impulsive reaction, you're not being cold out of malice. You're exercising self-control and showing that you master your emotions. This is inner power in its purest form. With every conscious decision, you reprogram your own life. And when you realize you no longer respond to certain triggers, you understand that personal growth is not about forgetting the past, but about reorganizing the present so the past has no more power. Psychological strength grows when you refuse to be a hostage to others' behavior. You no longer need to explain your choices to those who wouldn't understand. The simple fact of moving forward is already the greatest answer you can give. The most fascinating thing is realizing that when you maintain this level of emotional control, even those who underestimated you begin to change their tone. Stability unsettles those who expected to see you break, and that in itself is a reminder of how much your decisions shape your reality. This is the point where Key 1 begins to show its real strength. Each decision is a building block of your emotional freedom. The clearer your choices, the farther you move from chaos, and the closer you get to a life guided by your own inner power. And it's curious because when this awareness becomes a habit, something unexpected begins to happen. Key 2 is to practice rational detachment. This does not mean turning to stone or eliminating emotions. It means clarity. It's understanding that holding on to something that has already fulfilled its role in your life is not love. It is resistance to the inevitable. And resistance like that only robs your inner peace. Epictetus said, "Do not say you have lost, say you have returned." This phrase is one of the greatest lessons of Stoicism. It reminds us that nothing is truly ours forever. People, moments, objects, everything is on loan. And learning to return them without destroying yourself is emotional freedom. Rational detachment is not an act of calculated coldness, but of emotional intelligence. It's understanding that by keeping ties to what no longer makes sense, you block the space for new experiences, new people, and even for your own growth. Think of a drawer full of clothes you never wear. As long as it's full, there is no room for anything new. Your mind works the same way. When you don't practice emotional distancing from what no longer serves you, there's no mental space left for balance and personal focus. The first step to developing this inner strength is seeing reality without the filters of nostalgia or idealization. Attachment creates illusions. It makes you believe you need that to be happy. But when you break toxic ties, you discover that happiness is a matter of self-knowledge. Rational detachment is different from simply disappearing. It's a conscious decision to cut ties that drain energy and hinder personal growth. It's recognizing that certain connections, no matter how intense they were, no longer contribute to your inner power. A practical example. A person keeps old messages from an ex. They feed memories, longing, and resentment. Rational detachment would be deleting those messages, not as revenge, but as an act of mental mastery. It's letting go so that the heart can find inner peace. Freeing yourself from unnecessary attachments is like opening the windows of a house that's been closed for years. Fresh air comes in, light spreads. You feel lighter. That's how strategic silence works. You don't fight for what leaves, you simply allow it to go. Many confuse detachment with indifference, but the truth is, it requires much more psychological strength than giving in to the impulse to hold on. It takes courage to face the initial emptiness, the feeling of loss, and remain firm in the choice to let go. A powerful mental exercise to train the act of detachment is simple. Close your eyes and imagine that each relationship, object, or situation you value is tied to you by a string. Now imagine cutting one of those strings and observing how you feel. If the cut hurts, it's a sign that there is attachment there. But as you repeat the exercise, the discomfort fades. This is emotional independence in the making. Over time, you realize you don't need to carry everything in order to move forward. This exercise is resilience training. It teaches the mind to let go even when there is strong emotional attachment. It doesn't erase memories, but changes the way you relate to them. You stop being a hostage and become the guardian of your own balance. Practicing rational detachment is also about being aware of your own value. Those who know their inner strength do not fear strategic distancing. On the contrary, they understand that this distance is necessary to preserve self-control and avoid relapses into toxic relationships. It's not uncommon that when you start letting go, the people who once held you try to come back. That's when calculated coldness becomes essential. Not giving in is not pride, it's personal focus. It's maintaining mental mastery over impulses that could reopen wounds. A friend told me that after years stuck in a draining relationship, he decided to donate all the gifts he had received from that person. It was symbolic. By removing the objects from his space, he felt he was also removing the negative energy he carried. That is truly cutting ties. This kind of decision strengthens self-love, because it's not about punishing the other person, but about protecting yourself, about creating space for new connections, healthier ones, aligned with your current level of awareness and self-knowledge. Little by little, you understand that overcoming rejection is not about proving your worth to the one who left, but realizing that your worth never depended on that validation. It's rebuilding yourself based on what truly matters, not on what has already passed. Rational detachment also teaches patience, because in the beginning, absence is uncomfortable. It feels like something is missing, but soon that absence transforms into inner peace. And you realize you haven't lost anything. You've simply returned what no longer belonged to you. This clarity spreads to other areas of life. You begin to choose more wisely where to invest your energy, decline invitations that add nothing, and filter interactions. Your psychological strength grows with each decision that protects your mental and emotional space. And over time, you see that rational detachment doesn't close doors. On the contrary, it opens paths to deeper experiences and more genuine relationships. And it's precisely at this point that the next key begins to take shape. Key 3 is to redirect your attention to your true priorities. Attention is energy. And just like the electric power that fuels a house, it needs to be directed toward what sustains your life, not what drains it. Where you place your focus, you place your inner strength. Stoicism reminds us that it's not possible to live fully if the mind is constantly occupied with what adds nothing. Every thought lost in useless worries is a piece of vital energy that is no longer invested in growth and inner peace. Attention is like a bank account. If you spend it all on momentary impulses, pointless arguments, toxic relationships, memories of someone who should have been forgotten, there's nothing left to invest in what truly builds you. This is the opposite of self-control. When you practice emotional detachment, you realize that redirecting your focus is an act of self-love. It's the calculated coldness of saying no to certain distractions, so you can say yes to what feeds your inner power, your mental mastery, and your emotional independence. To identify true priorities, you need to take an honest inventory of your life. Ask yourself, which areas, people, and projects strengthen my resilience and emotional intelligence? Which ones only drain my energy? That clarity is the beginning of strategic distancing. A practical example: someone spends hours revisiting old photos, waiting for signs from an ex. This consumes time, personal focus, and psychological strength. Realigning focus means replacing this habit with actions that strengthen the present, such as starting a course or practicing a sport. Focus is the lens that amplifies results. If you keep it pointed at what is already gone, you only see resentment. If you turn it toward the future, you start to see possibilities. This is how to overcome rejection, not with promises of change from the other person, but with real changes in yourself. A simple exercise is to list 3 goals that would make a difference in your life right now. Then, remove 1 hour a day from useless activities and reallocate that time to those goals. Small changes in attention generate big advances in personal growth. Inner strength grows when you cultivate mental discipline to avoid getting lost in distractions. It's strategic silence applied to the mind, not allowing every external stimulus to steal your focus. This is the essence of emotional control in everyday life. Breaking ties with what diverts your attention is just as important as cutting ties with harmful people. It's not just about relationships, but about habits. Sensationalist news, excessive social media, empty conversations, all of this erodes inner peace. Often, redirecting focus requires discomfort. It's letting go of what brings immediate pleasure, but no lasting results. It's choosing reading that expands self-knowledge instead of hours of distraction that build nothing. This is resilience in action. I remember when I had to reorient my own attention. I was spending energy trying to understand other people's decisions. When I realized the drain, I replaced that habit with writing every day about my projects. In months, my emotional independence skyrocketed. Attention has a multiplying power. What you feed grows. If you feed insecurities, they strengthen. If you feed actions that build, your personal growth accelerates. This is how long-term psychological strength is developed. Creating practical actions to sustain focus requires strategy. Set schedules for social media, establish limits for unproductive interactions, plan routines that include activities that bring growth, whether it's learning something new or taking care of your body and mind. This redirection is not a one-time act, but a habit. The more you practice it, the more you notice your life starting to align with what matters. And that feeling of alignment is powerful fuel to maintain emotional control. Emotional distancing is reinforced when your attention is occupied with real priorities. This reduces mental space for painful memories and prevents emotional relapses. It's a protective mechanism against toxic relationships. If you notice you're investing too much energy in something you can't control, it's time to cut that flow. This decision is an act of self-love and a demonstration of inner power. It's like turning off a faucet that wastes water. Only the water is your mental energy. Life changes when attention stops being a wasted resource and starts being applied with emotional intelligence. This generates a clarity that makes it impossible to return to old patterns of distraction. And little by little, you discover that what once seemed impossible, forgetting someone, overcoming resentment, breaking ties, becomes the natural consequence of well-directed focus. The mind, once overloaded, now breathes. And it's precisely when this mental breathing stabilizes that space opens for something even more transformative. Key 4 is to reinterpret pain as learning. Most people see pain as an enemy, something to be avoided at all costs. But Stoicism, with the clarity of Marcus Aurelius, reminds us the obstacle becomes the way. And when we understand this, life changes radically. Pain is not just suffering, it's a sign, a call for you to look at something you've been ignoring. It's in this moment that emotional detachment finds its deepest meaning, not running from what hurts, but learning to turn pain into inner power. Emotional control is not built in times of calm, it is forged in storms. Every loss, every rejection, every breakup is a laboratory where you train self-control, resilience, and emotional intelligence. It's where you learn in practice to overcome resentment and cut harmful ties. Strategic distancing often arises from pain. It's the moment you realize there's no point in fighting for something that only brings exhaustion. And when you step away, you discover that the pain lessens and gives way to inner peace. This is the true beginning of personal growth. I remember a woman who, after being betrayed, decided not to seek revenge or explanations. She applied calculated coldness, moved to another city, started a new job, and immersed herself in personal projects. Months later, she said that episode had been the trigger for her emotional independence. Pain has the ability to reveal strengths you didn't know you had. It forces the mind to create new paths, to develop psychological strength, and to practice mental mastery. It's like a muscle that only grows when it faces resistance. When Marcus Aurelius said, "The obstacle becomes the way," he wasn't romanticizing suffering. He was teaching that adversity is the raw material for transformation. The difference lies in how you choose to respond. That choice determines whether pain will break you or shape you. A practical exercise to reinterpret pain is to write down every day 3 things it has taught you. It could be patience, it could be paying attention to signs, it could be self-love. This record becomes a map of your evolution, showing that each wound brought growth. Strategic silence is also a silent teacher. When you stop reacting impulsively to pain and choose to observe it, you uncover hidden lessons. You learn, for example, that overcoming rejection is not erasing memories but giving them new meaning. Emotional distancing allows the mind to analyze the situation clearly. Without it, pain becomes a whirlwind that prevents rational decisions. With it, you see patterns, recognize mistakes, and strengthen your personal focus to avoid repeating them. Breaking ties can be painful, but it is also liberating. The initial pain is the price paid for emotional freedom. It is the act of letting go of what no longer serves you, even if it once meant a lot. It's courage disguised as loss. When you reinterpret pain, you begin to see that it is not the end but a portal. It creates space for self-knowledge, for strengthening resilience, and for awakening inner power. It is an invitation to become the most solid version of yourself. I knew a businessman who lost everything in a poorly calculated investment. Instead of sinking into lamentations, he studied the market, reevaluated strategies, and started over. Today he says that failure was the best thing that ever happened to him because it taught him mental mastery and focus. This is the secret. Pain teaches what comfort never will. In comfort, there is no urgency to change. In pain, there is. It is in pain that the brain creates new connections and discovers hidden abilities. It is there that inner strength is tested and validated. Stoicism reminds us that there's no point in resisting the inevitable. If the obstacle is inevitable, the best path is to go through it. And in going through it, you learn to deal with your emotions in a mature way, practicing genuine emotional control. Calculated coldness is not about ignoring pain, but about not letting it dictate your moves. It is saying, "I feel, but I decide." It is an act of emotional independence that turns resentment into lessons and suffering into a growth strategy. An effective method is to analyze each difficult situation as if it were a teacher. Ask yourself, what is this experience trying to show me? Sometimes the lesson is about limits, other times about patience, and often about the need to cut ties to preserve your inner peace. Strategic distancing, when viewed through this lens, stops being just an escape and becomes a tool for evolution. It is a necessary pause to reorganize thoughts, strengthen resilience, and prepare the ground for new opportunities. When pain is reinterpreted, what once seemed like a weight becomes a push. Rejection turns into redirection. Loss becomes space for something new. Mistakes turn into experience. And in this cycle, your personal growth accelerates. Emotional freedom is born from this process. Because when you understand that pain is not an enemy, you stop fighting against it and start using it as an ally. And the more you do that, the stronger your mental mastery over any adversity becomes. It's not about seeking pain, but about not wasting it when it arrives. Every tear can be a brick in the construction of your psychological strength if you decide it will be. The choice is always yours, and it's curious how, when you take ownership of this power, the same situations that once would have knocked you down become merely manageable challenges. Resilience grows, and with it, the certainty that nothing is big enough to stop you. The obstacle becomes the way when you look at it and say, "You won't block me, you will direct me." This is the essence of emotional detachment, not clinging to the idea that things should be different, but learning from what is. And in applying this, you discover that even the oldest pains can be redefined. They cease to be open wounds and become silent medals of your journey, a constant reminder of your ability to survive and thrive. Key 4 is not just a beautiful philosophy. It is a practical tool for any situation: a breakup, a layoff, a failure, a betrayal. All of these events, if well interpreted, can become the beginning of something better. And it's precisely when you master this skill that you begin to see the next level, where pain not only teaches, but also drives you toward a kind of strength that few people know. Key 5 is to build an emotional fortress. I'm not talking about walls that isolate you from the world, but about an internal structure so solid that no external pressure can knock you down. It is the ability to remain firm, even when everything around you seems to crumble. Emotional fortress is the set of practices, choices, and habits that strengthen your emotional control. It is the result of a quiet work of self-knowledge where you learn to respond with intention instead of reacting on impulse. Stoicism teaches that it is not what happens that determines your inner peace, but the way you choose to interpret and react. This is the essence of emotional independence, not handing over control of your mind to anyone, no matter how intense the situation. To build this fortress, the first pillar is healthy boundaries. They work like gates that filter what enters your life. Saying no to toxic relationships, cutting ties that drain your energy, and maintaining strategic distancing are acts of self-love. Setting boundaries is not about rejecting the world. It's about protecting your inner power. People who are used to crossing your limits will find your new stance strange. But it's exactly then that you notice the psychological strength that comes from holding your ground. The second pillar is cultivating self-confidence. This doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built when you keep promises you make to yourself, when you maintain personal focus, and when you honor your own time. Every small commitment kept reinforces your resilience. Self-confidence grows in strategic silence when you learn to act without the need to announce every step. This protects your mental space and avoids external interference that could shake your personal growth. The third pillar is to respond with intention. A response is not a reaction. A response is thinking before acting, analyzing with emotional intelligence what truly deserves your energy. It's calculated coldness that prevents provocations from breaking your balance. A simple example. Someone tries to provoke you into losing control. The automatic reaction would be to argue. The intentional response is to maintain emotional distance, preserve inner peace, and cut off the energy that would feed the conflict. This posture is a shield against manipulation. Those who build an emotional fortress understand that not every battle is worth fighting. Some are won simply by not engaging. This is the mental mastery that ensures real emotional freedom. Fortresses are not built on good days. They are raised in moments of high pressure. Every time you stand firm in the face of criticism, rejection, or frustration, you reinforce the walls of this internal structure. A practical exercise to strengthen this foundation is to identify your biggest emotional triggers. Write them down, then create planned responses for each one. That way, when they arise, you already have your intention defined, avoiding impulsive reactions. Self-knowledge is the cement of this construction. Without understanding your vulnerabilities, there's no way to protect your inner peace. Knowing where you are most easily shaken is the key to creating self-protection strategies. Strategic distancing is not an act of weakness, but of maintaining mental stability. It's the conscious choice to avoid environments and people that drain your energy and compromise your personal growth. Breaking ties that compromise your emotional health is painful, but necessary. It's like removing loose stones before building a wall. If they remain, all the work will be unstable. This is the price of a solid fortress. I remember a colleague who, after years in an abusive work environment, decided to quit. He lost a high salary, but gained inner peace and personal focus. Today, he has built his own business and says the decision was his strongest act of self-love. An emotional fortress also means knowing how to recover quickly from falls. Resilience is the ability to return to balance after a blow. The more you practice, the shorter the time between the fall and the recovery. Calculated coldness protects against hasty decisions. It prevents you from destroying relationships or opportunities by acting in the heat of the moment. It's thinking about the long term, not just the momentary relief. When you live inside this fortress, the external world loses the power to define your happiness. You depend less on others' validation and more on your own sense of value. This is emotional freedom in its purest form. Strategic silence is the guard that watches over the gates of this fortress. It filters words, controls reactions, and maintains internal order. With it, you step away from empty arguments and preserve energy for what truly matters. A good test to know if your fortress is solid is to observe how you react to unforeseen events. If you can remain calm, refocus, and move forward, it's a sign that the foundations are firm. Building this structure takes time. It's daily work of conscious choices, choosing what enters, what stays, and what must be removed. It's practicing emotional detachment and cutting ties that threaten your stability. When this fortress is built, life stops being a sequence of reactions and becomes a series of decisions aligned with your priorities. You become the master of your own destiny, immune to emotional storms. And it's precisely in this state of stability that the opportunity arises to move to an even more refined level of self-control, one where you not only withstand pressure, but also turn each challenge into fuel to grow even more. Key 6 is to cultivate gratitude. It may seem simple, but it's one of the most powerful tools for maintaining emotional control and achieving emotional freedom. Gratitude changes the lens through which you see the world, revealing value even in moments of pain. Stoicism reminds us that life is not made only of what we want, but also of what we manage to appreciate. When you practice gratitude, even obstacles gain meaning. It's as if your personal focus began to illuminate what already works, and not only what's missing. Often, emotional detachment begins precisely when you realize there is already much to be grateful for. When you value what you have, it becomes easier to let go of what doesn't contribute. Gratitude creates space for strategic distancing without bitterness. Gratitude is also a form of calculated coldness against negativity. By training the mind to recognize what is good, you reduce the strength of resentment and strengthen inner peace. It's a silent defense against toxic relationships and destructive influences. Practicing gratitude does not mean denying pain. It means recognizing that even in it there is something to be learned. It's turning personal growth into a habit, training mental mastery to see opportunities in any scenario. A simple and effective method is the gratitude journal. Every day, write down 3 things you are grateful for. They can be big, like a new job, or small, like hot coffee in the morning. The important thing is to create consistency. This exercise trains psychological strength because it forces the mind to look for reasons to be grateful, even when the situation seems difficult. Over time, the brain begins to naturally identify positive patterns, reinforcing self-control. Gratitude helps overcome rejection because it shifts the focus. Instead of clinging to what ended, you look at what remains. And this generates resilience, as it maintains emotional balance even when bonds break. I remember a friend who, after a painful breakup, decided to write down 5 things he was grateful for every day. At first, it seemed artificial, but within a few weeks his attitude changed. He cut ties with harmful habits and found inner strength to start over. Gratitude strengthens self-awareness. By recognizing what is good for you, you better understand where to invest your energy. This helps set priorities and practice emotional detachment from anything that does not sustain your inner peace. This practice also combats constant comparison. By focusing on what you already have, the anxiety over what others possess decreases. It is applied emotional intelligence, removing energy from what does not build and redirecting it to what nourishes. One important point is that gratitude does not cancel the need for change. You can be grateful and still want more. The difference is that, with gratitude, the path to get there is lighter and less impulsive. In strategic silence, gratitude works as fuel. It prevents you from falling into the trap of seeking external validation to feel complete. You already recognize value in your life, and this protects you from emotional manipulation. Another practical exercise is targeted gratitude. Choose an area of life, health, work, relationships, and list everything good it has brought you. This strengthens resilience and reinforces strategic distance from areas that do not offer the same return. Gratitude is a form of emotional detachment because it teaches that nothing is guaranteed. Every moment is unique, and knowing how to appreciate it without excessive attachment prevents unnecessary suffering when it passes. This practice turns mental mastery into something natural. You start reacting less to provocations because you are more focused on what builds. Gratitude takes the power away from the triggers that used to destabilize you. Calculated coldness becomes softer when combined with gratitude. You maintain clear boundaries, but without resentment. This balance increases inner strength and reinforces personal growth in a healthy way. When you recognize value in the present, you avoid falling into the trap of living stuck in the past or anxious about the future. This is emotional freedom, being whole in the now without clinging to what no longer exists. Gratitude also strengthens relationships. By expressing genuine appreciation, you create an environment of trust and mutual respect. And when that environment does not exist, it becomes easier to cut ties without guilt. Even in difficult times, gratitude can be the thread that keeps mental stability. It is what prevents pain from turning into despair. By finding something to value, no matter how small, you keep hope alive. This key shows that life does not have to be perfect to be good. There is beauty in the imperfect, and recognizing it is a sign of emotional maturity. It is proof that personal growth does not depend on the absence of problems, but on how you face them. And when gratitude becomes a habit, it opens the door to something even deeper, a clarity of purpose that completely changes the way you live and decide. Key 7 is to practice conscious acceptance. Many people mistake acceptance for giving up. But true acceptance is not surrender, it is wisdom. It is the recognition that certain battles are not worth your energy and that preserving inner peace is more valuable than winning any argument. Stoicism teaches that emotional freedom begins when you understand the difference between what is under our control and what is not. What we can change deserves action. What we cannot deserves acceptance. This clarity is the foundation of real emotional control. Accepting is not settling for what hurts. It is choosing strategic withdrawal when insisting only prolongs the pain. It is cutting ties that do not respect your boundaries. It is applied emotional detachment to protect your own mental stability. This practice requires mental mastery. It asks you to identify when you are fighting against something unchangeable and redirect your efforts toward constructive actions. It is like leaving a blocked road and finding a new path without losing personal focus. Often insisting on changing the uncontrollable leads to exhaustion. It is the case of someone trying to save a toxic relationship, believing the other person will change out of love. Conscious acceptance shows that true inner strength lies in knowing when to walk away. A practical exercise is to list, when faced with a problem, two groups: what you can control and what you cannot. Once separated, commit to acting only on what is in the first group. This simple decision increases resilience and reduces frustrations. Accepting does not mean approving everything. It means recognizing reality without illusion. It is having emotional intelligence to avoid wasting energy trying to change the past or predict every detail of the future. It is living with attention to the present, cultivating inner peace. Strategic silence is an ally in this practice. When you accept, you do not need to justify your decision to those who do not understand. The absence of explanations is a sign of emotional independence and confidence in your own inner power. I remember a woman who lost her job unfairly. Instead of spending months suing the company, she decided to use the severance pay to open a small business. Today she says that practicing conscious acceptance was what saved her psychological strength. This decision is an example of calculated coldness, not ignoring the pain, but directing energy toward what builds. By accepting what she could not change, she found space to create something new. This is personal overcoming in practice. Emotional detachment helps in this process. When you distance yourself from the heat of the situation, you can see more options. Acceptance becomes easier when emotion is not in command, but reason strengthened by self-awareness. Conscious acceptance is also an antidote to old grudges. By understanding that it is not possible to change the past, you release the weight you carry. This release is a profound act of self-love and emotional detachment. Emotional control is strengthened when you choose not to react to predictable provocations. Instead of responding on impulse, you decide where to place your energy. This decision preserves your personal focus and prevents relapses into destructive patterns. A habit that reinforces this key is meditation focused on acceptance. By breathing deeply and mentally acknowledging that it is what it is, you train your mind to deal with reality without resistance. This training strengthens resilience. Consciously accepting also helps overcome rejection. You understand that the other person's choice does not define your worth, and by accepting this, you can cut ties without carrying guilt or resentment, keeping your inner peace intact. This posture is liberating because it takes you out of the victim position. Instead of spending energy asking yourself, "Why me?" you ask yourself, "What can I do now?" It is a leap in emotional intelligence that completely changes your journey. Conscious acceptance is not passivity. It is strategy. It is like an experienced player giving up a bad move to save the game. You don't get lost trying to prove something. You preserve strength for what matters. In the long run, this practice transforms your worldview. You stop holding on to what doesn't depend on you and start investing in what is within your reach. And this builds an emotional freedom that is hard to shake. Stoicism reminds us that we cannot control the wind, but we can adjust the sails. Accepting is exactly that, adjusting the course without wasting energy cursing the storm. This choice is a sign of inner strength, not weakness. When conscious acceptance becomes a habit, you live more lightly. Small setbacks are no longer crises. Malicious words find nowhere to wound. Your emotional fortress becomes impenetrable. And it is in this state of strategic calm that you realize that this entire journey, from emotional detachment to acceptance, builds something even greater. The ability to live in peace with yourself, regardless of what happens around you. You have come this far. 7 keys. 7 silent and powerful ways to achieve the emotional freedom that so many people spend their entire lives trying to reach without success. And now, the decision is in your hands. What will you do with all this? Will you keep it as just another video that made you think for a few minutes? Or will you put each key into practice, turning your emotional control into an unbreakable shield against any attempt at manipulation? Stoicism has shown you that emotional detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. That emotional distancing is not contempt, it is self-care. That cutting ties is not cruelty, it is the preservation of your inner peace and your inner power. You already know that calculated coldness can be stronger than any speech. That strategic silence is capable of disarming toxic relationships and breaking bonds that prevent you from growing. But will you have the courage to apply it? Think about everything that has hurt you, about the grievances that still carry weight, about the energy you still spend on those who do not deserve it. Now imagine that same energy being redirected to strengthen your personal focus, your resilience, and your personal growth. How many times have you wasted hours, days, months trying to change something that was not under your control? How many opportunities have you lost by not practicing conscious acceptance? How many times have you been late to your own life by waiting for the other person to change? If you want to master your destiny, you must take control of your mind. This means practicing emotional detachment daily, cultivating self-love, maintaining non-negotiable boundaries, and using your psychological strength as the guide for every decision. The emotional freedom you seek is just one step away. But that step requires courage. It requires saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. It requires breaking ties before they break you. It requires mental mastery over every reaction. Will you keep living to please those who don't care? Or will you invest in your emotional independence, even if it means facing the discomfort of walking away? This is the question that separates those who change from those who merely watch change happen. Remember, overcoming rejection is not about the other person. It is about you. It is about not allowing one experience to define the rest of your life. It is about maintaining personal focus, self-control, and the clarity that your peace is worth more than any attachment. The world is full of people trapped in toxic relationships because they never learned to use calculated coldness to protect themselves. But you don't have to be one of them. You already have the tools, you already know the keys. All that's left is to act. And make no mistake, acting is not easy. It will hurt. There will be silence. There will be moments of doubt. But in the end, you will realize that every second of discomfort was worth it to achieve a life with more resilience, more self-awareness, and more inner peace. Ask yourself now, who would I be if I cut all the ties that weaken me? What would happen if, starting today, I redirected all my attention to what truly matters? What would my life look like if I let go? For real. These questions are not meant to be answered now. They are meant to echo in your mind until they turn into action. Because thought without action is only theory, and theory doesn't change destiny. Action does. You are ready to practice strategic silence, to choose your battles, to walk away from everything that does not serve your growth. And if you are ready, you already know. Every key you learn today is a step toward an unbreakable emotional fortress. So, do this. Subscribe to the channel now. Turn on notifications to keep learning how to master your emotions, break harmful bonds, and build the life you deserve. And share this video with someone who needs this strength. Because maybe, for that person, hearing what you heard today could be the difference between staying trapped and starting to live. And you can be the trigger for that change. The 7 keys are with you. The next decision is too. And remember, those who control their own emotions control their own destiny.